generation, as we saw with the introduction of many DC characters, World War II, as we saw with the introduction of several Marvel characters. You have this ability to relate to the masses in a time when they themselves are going through great change and struggle.
Well, superheroes in general have been like a big part of the childhood and coming up as a teenager. It's like it's something to get yourself lost in and say, there's some crazy times going on right now. It's just sometimes you need an escape. Comic books for that, for me. So there's always been a love for it.
Everything about comic books is great. Like, I can't point to like one specific thing that made me like them. Everything, like story-wise, the art, and the characters, obviously.
As a child, growing up, there's something of, they're relatable. They really reach out to the viewer, the reader.
I mean, they do deal with some real problems, and it's like, sometimes you can relate to them.
The fact that you still have archetypes and scenarios which common people can relate to, the fact that you have internal struggles. It's not just about fighting some masked villain. It's about working through relationships. It's about building integrity, and it's about building your internal strength and your internal worth.
Let's say like Peter Parker and Spider-Man, like I relate to the guy mainly because growing up as a kid I was like bullied, and like Peter Parker growing up was bullied. So like reading his comics, I was always like, man, like I get you, man. I understand, So like that's kind of why I love comics in general, because they all have some way of like reaching out to the reader.
You grow up with like very little role models that you start poking at every single superhero, and they in a sense become your role models, and you look up to them, and they're obviously really fascinating because they could do things nobody can do.
One of the reasons that comic books and superhero films and television shows and franchises in general are so widely popular is because they do have appeal to mass audience. There are a lot of enduring qualities that can appeal to multiple people on multiple platforms, different phases of life.
Like, my personal favorite is Superman and Captain America. You see them on screen, and it's literally seeing what you thought you would see when you're reading the comic books, and you're immersed yourself into the comic book. Seeing Man of Steel, seeing the first Avenger and Civil War, this is exactly the vision that you had as a kid. Seeing it on the big screen, it's been a huge deal for say me personally.
They're huge. It's like one of the best things, getting to see it in real life. Because I mean, you had cartoons, which is pretty awesome, but to see them in a big screen, big budget movies, makes them look pretty awesome.
In a time where you have so much content that's being distributed to our homes, this is an opportunity to actually get people into the theaters.
Because, starting off as just two guys in an office, like, man, we want this to hit a big impact in life on people who read this. And other people probably doubted it, but I mean, look where we're at right now. Like Disney and Marvel, they own like the world at this point, but it's super mainstream to the point where like everyone knows who Spider-Man is, or everyone knows who that's Wolverine over there.
People you never would have thought were into comic books or any sort of comic book heroes are now into it. I could talk to somebody about anybody. Just bring up a comic book character, I know who they are. At the very least, they know who they are. And then you talk to more people who can expand on that. You can have conversations with people like that. Whereas before, you'd be labeled a nerd. You couldn't really talk about it.
And then you've also got this ability to help the newer generations connect to older generations, so it becomes more of a family experience to go see these films together as a family unit, and to essentially keep this cycle going, where you have one generation sharing things that appeal to them and that they loved, that still has modern relevance.
It's just starting. That's the really cool thing about it. So, you know, next generation, potentially our kids are going to be watching it too.
Just as superheroes can appeal across age groups, from small children all the way up to the elderly who grew up with these characters, that is still reinforced not just in going to see the movies together as a family or buying merchandise. You have a lot of these licensed characters who make, you know, live appearances at theme parks such as Disneyland, Disney World, for the Marvel franchise, but then you also have the Six Flags parks have DC characters where fans can come and interact with people portraying those superheroes. Appeal to audiences through enduring narratives, and those tend to be about protecting what you love, protecting who you love, and in a lot of ways, you know, fighting the good fight and doing things the American way.
So that's why I love comics.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.